This last week, I saw an article by Mike Watson over at Product Playground, and he was making a pretty brutal point. And the point he was making was that most teams do not have a strategy problem so much as a yes problem. And we talk about this, a lot of product management is saying no, but the reality is if every Slack direct message can cut the line, then your roadmap is basically a vision board with a whole lot of trauma. And we're going to talk about where product leaders actually earn their keep, trade-offs. We're going to talk about ownership and having someone in the room whose no actually means no, and the system that you put in place to actually make that a reality. We're going to get into some intros here for just a minute and to get started. So first of all, I want to say hello to this guy who started out building with Legos, then building product strategy, and now he's building careers. It's John Field, who's head of product at Career Whisperer.
Hey, everybody.
Well, welcome back, John. And on the Zoom call, he's got a fintech brain, hockey dad energy, and he's a Buc-ee's mascot in training. It's Seth Pelletier he's the senior director of product at Dayforce. There you go.
Hello.
I love your profile pic. And third up, he wrote the book, he bought the guitar, he's still got a clean face. It's Steve Johnson, from CEO and founder of Product Growth Leaders. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
And in just a minute, we'll have Brian Huss joining us at the table here as well. He'll be with us here in just a moment. But I sent everybody the article on that Kelly's dropping in the chat right now, really talking about the nature of your strategy or your product intake process. And I titled the section a little bit differently, though. I'm talking about why strategy isn't dying in the roadmap, it's dying in the intake form. And those interruptions, those things that get shoved in front of the roadmap. And I want to lead off with you, Steve, because I know you don't have any opinion on this matter at all whatsoever.
Am I answering a question or am I just ranting about the article?
I'm here for you to rant. So Mike's,
All right.
I can give you a question if you want one.
No, go ahead. I mean, I read that article going, hallelujah. I do think that most companies don't have a product strategy. And they rely on the roadmap not as a vision document, but as a project plan without any project planning, right? It's like, we want to do these things next quarter with no understanding of how big they might be or who's going to be assigned. And you may recall the story during COVID, a product manager's entire team went to the hospital with COVID, and her boss wondered if that might impact their next release. It blows my mind. But anyway, hidden in this article was certainly his rant was about, we all have to become better at saying no. But if you don't have a product strategy, you don't know what to say no to. And I think people choose to look at the roadmap and say, okay, here's our strategy document. But it's not a strategy document. It's, as Jana Basto says at ProdPad, it's a prototype of your strategy. It describes how you're going to get there, not what it is. But yeah, we all need to be better at saying no, or at least not yet.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the problem, because one of the things that we talk about, and you've got your new book, Customer Conversations, and we're reading that in book club. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes as well. And there you go. But one of the things that we talk about is getting all the feedback from all the different angles from customers directly, as well as your internal customers and so on, and how you take that knowledge in as part of your discovery process and have the right conversations and bring them in to inform your roadmap, to inform what you do. But so often that gets injected with much more urgency. Some of the last customer you talk to gets injected with much more urgency than maybe is wise. And I know, John, you and I were talking kind of at the beginning, and you had a really interesting observation about the nature of this problem. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so just to talk a little bit about my background, I've worked in public companies, private companies, VC-backed, PE-backed, and now, out on my own, directly working with Career Whisperer and selling things individually. And when you have investor-driven companies, waste is kind of part of the problem, right? Where it's like you're mining for product market fit and all of those kinds of things, that when you're working with smaller companies, smaller businesses, It's one where it's like, oh, you want that enhancement? That enhancement will be $5,000, $10,000. And then you have a meaningful conversation with somebody. When ideas are free or cheap, when a Slack message costs you $0 to pay, that people will then flood you with just whatever their ideas are. And so, for instance, if Slack had a place to swipe a credit card, and in order to send me an idea for how to make the product better, I need you to pay $5, it would drastically change the equation on how many ideas you have coming in and how many ideas you would have to say no to as well.
I remember we worked together years ago, for those who don't know, and we implemented a new customer intake, a new idea intake form. And we all, just like the article was talking about, motivated by, hey, we've got a really good organized place to keep all these ideas coming in. Mm-hmm. And we had a process in place for somebody to read those, for everybody to read those ideas and triage them and kind of categorize them. And the list got longer and longer and longer. Exactly what you're talking about. It was free. It was free to drop in an idea. Well, you had to be a customer, but if you were a customer, you could drop in an idea, and it became this massive backlog of things to consider that nobody could keep up with. So you could fish trends out. You could absolutely see trends in what people were asking for, and so it was useful in that way. But to your point there, the goal was, I think as we established it, if something was in the top 10% or the top 10 of suggestions from customers in terms of votes, then we were absolutely going to speak to it, whether we put it on the roadmap or not. We were going to intentionally address it and comment on it, because we couldn't do more than the top 10%. And so that intake form became yet another big source of frustration. Mm-hmm. Because customers would say, I've had my idea on here for months or years, and nobody's touched it or said anything about it. Well, you're the only one that cares about it.
Yeah, and we thought it would be, like when we implemented it, we thought it would be kind of self-censoring. Mm-hmm. Is that somebody would throw out an idea, and then they see that nobody else wanted to do it, and so they would naturally think, oh, okay, I don't have an idea that's catching fire, and that's fine. But what it really became is that people felt entitled to get an answer to every idea. And that becomes a lot of noise. And interestingly enough, Jason, based on our experience there, when I went to my next startup, which only had 8 people in it when I joined, and we grew it to 50 in about 18 months, in Jira, I had the DevOps guy create a state called the Museum of Good Ideas. And if we didn't do something about an idea within 90 days, 1 quarter, because we were a small team, then it automatically went into the museum. Mm-hmm. And you could go and you could look at and observe the great ideas that all sit in that museum. And if we wanted to pull one out, we could pull one out. But it's like, as the product guy, I'm not going to continue to prioritize, a list of 500 great ideas and have to defend why we're not doing every one of them when I have an engineering team of 4 people trying to get this startup off the ground. It's just not a good use of time.
Right. Seth, let me swing over to you. You've got no shortage of good ideas, and you've got no shortage of stakeholders and people inserting them. How are you managing it?
Yeah, I was just going to say all the wincing that I was doing, everything everybody was saying. So a couple things. One, if you remember, I think it was a few weeks ago that I joined this first cup again and Misha made a comment about like the scarcity problem being over, right? Like there's no scarcity of ideas, and never everything's accelerated. So now those ideas come in faster, and people are like, oh, I could just build it faster. So one, I used to work for a gentleman, and I've now since stolen this kind of the moniker of it, but ideas are free. So there's like very similar to what John was saying. Like I have a backlog right now of, I don't know, 200, 300 plus ideas. And that's like with a product that hasn't even caught scale yet, right? There's just ideas. The hardest part, again, now it's a speed thing. And we talked about like last time as well. And I'll still stand by this. I think Steve is absolutely right. Like to what we talked about last time, Misha's point was, there's no scarcity problem, just build everything. So now you have to be even more litigious around the actual like taste of like what you're going to build, and is it right? And I agree that like I think a lot of companies say they have a product strategy. I don't know if it's necessarily a product strategy or it's what way the wind is blowing or what customer is committed the most like ACV, and that's what you need to deliver on. And obviously every industry is different, right? Like if you're a SaaS like software company, like yeah, it's ACV and it's what deal is going to get me over the line fastest and hit our numbers, or who's going to scream the loudest at your escalation path.
Yeah.
So I think it's the what I've done, and I'll tell you, I've kind of the point that was made around the DMs. I've told like at least other product managers on my team. I have told them that like, you know, part of my job is also making sure that they're out of the noise, or at least I protect their time as much as I possibly can. The random DMs of like, oh, hey, can we just sneak this in? Or all of that nonsense, like, to me, like, I'm gonna see back there. I forgot the name of it. But back there somewhere, there's a book about, it's called Making Work Visible, I think, might be the title. And it's all about unplanned work. Like unplanned work is the biggest time suck. And so what I've done is I've told every like product manager as well as designer, because I don't know if other people experience this. I have, whether it's sales or other people, like shit, like the general manager of my product decided to like commandeer my designer for like 2 days to do like a crazy like design session to like map out the future without like on a whim. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like, but another deliverables delayed. So all these like one-off requests, I've made it very clear to my team that they're like, they have every right to say no and like direct them to me. I have no problem getting into like, and Steve mentioned it, it's not a no, it's a not right now. Like, or it's a conversation of like, cool, if you want this other thing, this is all the other stuff that I'm not going to do for you, or that's going to get pushed out because time's finite. And so you know, back to that was a long answer. Back to yours.
I'm going to start calling you the heavy now, though.
But I mean, seriously, I take it very seriously. Like part of my job is this. I'll tell people no. I have no problem getting into the arguments and having people be mad at me about saying no to something. If it's actually going to make everything else that we're already committed to doing stay on track.
Yep.
So that's the biggest thing, right? And then like, I think it really does come down to, in terms of all the ideas and the prioritization of such, I'm very much a proponent of like, if you have like this goes back to Steve's point about a strategy, even if it's not like full blown like product strategy, as long as there is a unified, like everybody's bought into a singular metric or like goal of a product, whether that's for a quarter or a year. And if someone can articulate how it's a certain idea is going to get us towards that goal more than another idea, then cool, let's go.
Focus on a lighthouse, focus on a guidepost.
If you can't tell me how it's going to get us there, I have zero reason to do it. Unless it, like, I will say, like, my one caveat to that for any legal folks on the phone is I typically go with anything that's like compliance or legal related gets like kind of carte blanche because I'd rather not get sued. Like, so if there's like a possibility of like the company getting sued or like me being in deposition, like I'm good. We'll do that instead. But otherwise, it's a matter of just protecting your teams and making sure everybody's aligned. If there's not alignment on a goal, that's when you get all the swirl of, well, like this idea is better.
Yep.
You know, I want to jump in on this just for a second and get everybody to pay attention to what Seth just said, which is he said, or we're going to do this instead of that.
Yeah.
You can have almost anything. You can't have everything. So you're hopefully your strategy says these are things we won't do. These are people we won't serve. You're right. But fundamentally, just the core idea of, yeah, we can do anything. Which one of these is the most important for our business right now?
Almost anything is possible with unlimited time and unlimited money. None of us have either of those.
Right.
Yeah. I stand by it. And like, maybe like one of these days, like I should have Steve, not me because I'm not a good writer, write a book about it. I've always equated product management to like the closest things to a sales job that's not a sales job.
Yeah.
Like my entire job is a series of negotiations. Yep. It's what are we going to do today versus what are we going to do tomorrow? Oh, you want this thing, but not this thing? Cool. It's no different than negotiating options of a vehicle.
Yep. Cool. Thank you. And we got Brian. Brian came screaming in here, built for speed, certainly not built for boredom. Welcome back, Brian. You have spent a lot of time leading product and innovation in some pretty noisy organizations. Yeah. Tell me how you've managed the noise.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the similar points that Seth was just making around saying like, okay, here's an idea. If somebody's pushing to do this right now, okay, what are we not doing? And in addition to that, the thing that I would be deprioritizing, here's a reminder for you as to why that thing was prioritized in the first place, right? So actually, I went to a talk years ago where someone said the product manager is the chief reminder officer, and that's always resonated with me, that we are actually, it's like, how do you remember that we made these choices for a reason, and if we're going to make a different choice for a reason, just make sure we're clear about it.
Yep.
But two, I know we were talking about like idea intake forms and things of that nature, and the way that I've tried to build those is like right there to say like, okay, what is there an actual success metric with this, and if so, what is it? Link right there. Okay, if your company has however many, 3 or 5 or something, like key product principles, like put those right in the form, so you force that little moment of thought around like, is this just like the random thing I thought of in my shower, or does this actually like correspond to who we're trying to be and what we're trying to do as a business? I mean, I love the idea, like great ideas can come from anywhere. Like some of the best products I've ever worked on is something that like a finance person or an operations person thought of in the first place.
Yeah.
But they had that kind of thinking of, this is not just my random idea. There's a reason to do it. And it's the kind of thing that in product, if you get one of those ideas and you say, there's something here, but maybe the metric is not quite fully baked, like that's a role that we can play to say, flesh that out, figure out, okay, what is at the root of this, and does it actually tie to a metric? Can we make it even bigger than the initial idea was going to be?
Yeah. And I know your last company was one of the fastest growing B2C sports entertainment companies in the world, in history. And I cannot imagine, between investors having their opinion and customers having, here's how I want to play, the volume of quality recommendations, suggestions, requests coming at you, and the volume of crap would be an unbearable burden. I'm really curious for those in the audience as well. If you're out here, would love to hear your thoughts when you're managing that intake, making sure that you're getting all the right inputs from outside of your own head into the decision pipeline, but do you have a clear strategy that you're managing against, or is that intake managing your strategy for you? I'd love to hear some other opinions. Allison, I see you've got your hand up. Allison, Callendar. I got to be specific. We got 2 Allisons. Welcome back.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I always enjoy these conversations. They're great. I'll say I did have the very ominous task of setting up an intake process in a Fortune 20 company recently. We were a financial system. So granted, most of our business stakeholders were internal stakeholders. But what I'll say from that perspective is it was very important for us to start with a vision house. And I know a lot of people feel like a vision house is something that just the business strategists do, and it stops there, right? You see the vision from your executives and you're like, okay, great, that's the vision for the year. But really what we did was each of our products also created a vision house that laddered up and down from the corporate strategy. And I think Seth was saying something like, the product strategy shouldn't be separate from the corporate strategy. And this is where you can help to say no. In your intake form, your internal customers at the very least should understand the corporate strategies. They should be able to verbalize why this excellent idea is pushing the product towards the corporate strategy. If they can't, they should consider it. And so I would say certainly have a vision house for your product. Make sure that it ladders up to the corporate strategy. This helps you say no if something comes in sideways and doesn't meet the success metrics that the company is driving towards. The other thing that we did is we had a product principal role, which was somebody that had really in-depth subject area expertise in the product area. And that person really did the triage for intake. And so we would spend some time in triage, and we would understand the level of effort for each one of these incoming ideas. Sometimes an incoming idea is really impactful towards the strategy and very cheap. You might go ahead and prioritize that one, right? Versus something that's a great idea, but it's going to take 3 years. It's going to cost $18 million and it's not going to move the needle at all. So again, it kind of helps you say no. And I think another panelist was saying, what is in your intake form?
Yeah.
And are you partnering with the people who are offering these ideas to everybody come to a good idea of how to prioritize it? And then the last thing I would say is making sure that you had a good feedback loop with the people who are offering these wonderful museum of ideas. And how are you transparent about your prioritization? And how do they know where their ideas fall in the vision house, in the strategy, in the prioritization, and why? And I feel like having good communication, especially with internal customers, is the key. So we had regular ceremonies where we would share that with our customers so that they can understand whether or not their idea was in the backlog or whether or not it was going to be prioritized and what those trade-offs were.
What those
Yeah, all-
what shape did those ceremonies take? How did you, were these, conference type events, user group type events, or what did those look like?
They were monthly user group type events. So we would go through each month the intake that came in for the month, and we would share with them the top 10 things that we were prioritizing or sizing and why those were at the top. And most of the time, it was around, is this a size or a value that benefits us? And which strategic initiative was it benefiting? And why were we choosing it? Or again, just reiterating on what is the vision house for the product and why does your idea either fit that for this year or not fit that for this year or for the quarter.
Yep, just real quickly, I want to just do a quick around the table, and anybody else, if you got a comment or want to jump in, please throw your virtual hand in the air. There's a little raise hand icon at the bottom of your UI. But I just want to real quickly, Brian, think of the last 2 or 3 companies that you've been with. Did you have a formal intake process, or was it haphazard?
Kind of somewhere in the middle, I'd say. I mean, we built we built some automation into Slack where it forced you, if you were going to submit an idea for something to be worked on, to answer some questions about which of our audience segments is this serving? How does this map back to one or more of our strategic principles? What are the success metrics? And
So you did force them to at least make a case for the strategic alignment.
Yeah, I don't need them to do like a 20-slide deck and a deep financial model and everything, but I need them to give just a little bit of thought to, is this something that makes sense based on where we're headed as a business?
Yep. How about you, John?
Yeah, so what I would tell you is we had 2 processes. We had the most people process where it was relatively structured, and we had the HIPPO process.
Of course.
Which I ran personally.
The classic.
And I love that Steve just started laughing because he knows what I'm talking about, right? Hippos are the highest paid person with an opinion.
Yep.
And so making sure that, I also really like what Allison talked about, where it's like you've got to take the input, but then really making sure you go vision to, or you go strategy to vision to goals and outcomes to features. So that when I was then running this, I'm talking about it much more in terms of here's the vision for the company, here's the strategy for 2026 across the entire company. Based on that, here's the outcomes from a product standpoint that we are trying to drive to support the other departments, and here's the features that we're actually trying to ship to do that. And having metrics along the way, that also can be one of those things where then when somebody comes to you, especially if it's a hippo with an idea, hey, that sounds like a great idea. Let me break that down and let's see which one of these metrics we think that's going to move the needle on, especially when you're working with a large organization. That is helpful.
Real quick, I smile at the hippo piece. There was a Lenny's podcast a while back about growing influence, and I thought one of the fascinating things she said is when you get that idea and you actually don't think it's a good idea, the right response is not "that's stupid." The right response is "that's so interesting. What makes you think that way?"
Steve, you have worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of companies and product managers from all corners of the world. What is your take and view on the relative percentage of companies that you've worked for that have some sort of a formal, intentional process for managing intake versus just deal with it as it comes in?
99% deal with it as it comes in.
Yeah.
In fact, in my classes, I often show my intake form, and the first part of it is not surprising to those of you who know me. What problem are you trying to solve?
Yep.
Because most of them actually, most of the ideas are in fact stupid. I wish there was like some electric shock that we could use whenever somebody brings up one we've already
That's
said
adding
was
the
stupid.
cost to the idea.
Yeah, there we go. But I'm like, so my intake form and the one that I share with people starts with the problem, and then, all right, fine, tell me what you think your stupid idea is. And as you all know, when a customer or a sales rep tells you what the feature is, they're always wrong. If somebody can talk about the problem, they're always right, almost always right. And so we start with that, and then and part of the other part of the intake form, particularly useful with sales, is give me the names of 3 customers who are having this problem so that I can discuss it with them.
Yep.
And if that either of those fields is empty, screw you, stop calling here.
Yep.
Some of that's in my head.
Excellent.
So Steve just stole every answer I had. No, but in all seriousness, and I know like Steve's we'll call it resident expert, and has books and classes on this. I do not work for Atlassian, but I will tell you, I use Jira Product Discovery right now to manage like all my intake. And I have, if something wants to get done, like it has to be traceable work, unless it's like a bug fix, like whatever, like that. If it is going to be something that is going to be prioritized against something else, it has to come through Jira Product Discovery. And I have an intake form. I created a template, and the very first thing on the template is problem context. Like, I honestly, like,
Why are we talking about this in the first place?
I don't want sales. I don't want anybody else giving me a feature. I want them to tell me if it's a business problem, like, hey, revenue is down and I need to create more revenue. Cool, that's a problem. We can solve that. But if it's build this feature, not doing that. But it's what problem are we trying to solve? What's the impact? How are we going to measure success? Mm-hmm. If you tell me those 3 things, arguably, like, I can go to my product team and like we can figure it out.
Yep.
But it's and like from like a prioritization standpoint, I hold I think I do it like once a month, but I have a roadmap review with all of my internal stakeholders, and that's like operations, sales, implementation, like everybody that's involved. And I usually kind of try to frame it as like a cage match. Like, I want them to make their case of why their thing is more important than somebody else's thing. And like, if we do that in an open forum and everybody's not sensitive about it and like people can be candid, then I think we're in a good spot, because then people will, like, if you explain the problem you're trying to solve and the impact it's going to have on the business well enough, the other people that have things that they want prioritized should, in most cases, understand and be like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then it's not me saying no to somebody else, it's somebody else making a better argument than somebody else.
Nice. Yep.
If we can get there, like, then everything's a good spot. But I 100% agree with Steve. Like, it is, tell me what problem we're trying to solve. I don't need somebody to tell me what feature to build.
Yep.
I can figure that part out. I want to know where are we trying to go?
Awesome. And we're at the top of the hour, but Allison's got her hand up, and I want to bring her in. She's had some pretty insightful comments here, so I want to bring you back up here and see what you've got to say for us before we switch over.
Yeah, thank you. I won't be long. A couple quick things. I love everything everybody's saying, and I would say yes, definitely your intake process needs to be formalized. One thing I would say is that as we were trying to stand up product in our organization, it was really important to work with our customers, our internal customers, our IT teams, our balance teams on a RACI, and really help them understand the business is not going any longer directly to their favorite engineer and asking for stuff. The engineer has to say no. That has to go through intake, right? I mean, everybody has to be on board that the intake process is the process, and make sure that everybody understands what their responsibility is. What is product's responsibility in the process? What is the customer's responsibility in the process? And what is engineering's responsibility in the process? Certainly, the customer's responsibility is to identify the problem to solve, not to come with a solution, but to come with a problem, because solutioning is engineering's job. And then the other thing I would say is that in our formal intake process also was a requirement for the customer to tell us the value of their idea. So there was a lot of onus on the customer in the intake form to tell us why you think this is good. You say you need it. Why do you need it? What strategy does it align with? What value do you think it's bringing? What problem is this solving? And really make sure that we're all ready for the pitch meeting, the thing that Seth was talking about that helps us prioritize all of our trade-offs.
I love that
intake form, I think, is real important, and get that customer to do some work.
Yep. I love the concept that you touched on at the beginning of really kind of sharing that racy view to help people understand where everyone in the organization fits in that ideation and that idea management process. So it's not just here's your doorway, it's here's how everyone contributes, and this is why this is your doorway. That's great. So a lot of great insights this morning, and I want to thank our first cup panel. We had some great discussion here. Thank you, John. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Seth, and thank you, Allison, for jumping in here a couple times as well. I am sorry we did not get to introductions today. This conversation took on a life of its own, so we didn't get out to say hello to some people. But we got a lot of folks back that we haven't seen in a little while. We've also got some first-time faces, so do make sure that you say hi in chat there, and we'll get you on camera to introduce you next time around. Excuse me. Before we move into our sponsor recognition, I do want to jump over to our Product Coffee librarian and say hello to Allison Herbert, our other Allison here today, and tell us a little bit about what's going on with the book club, and we might have our author here as well.
That's right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Allison Herbert, Product Coffee Librarian. We kicked off our first discussion of customer conversations last week, and Steve was so grateful to join us. Had a great conversation around what is a customer conversation, where does it occur, who's doing it and not doing it. Surprise, some of us are, some of us aren't. And so we're really getting into what it takes to put one together, the practices that we can achieve outside of that. And it's still early enough. It's a very tiny book. You can see it on your screen there, but it's a thin book. So don't feel discouraged if you haven't gotten the book yet. Yep, there we go. You can join us for our next session on May 22nd. We're going to be jumping into actually doing or preparing for the customer conversation, and then breaking down some insights that Steve's got to share with us with his years of experience. You heard a little bit of it this morning. We were talking about that sales experience. We're here to understand, not explain away, as we have heard and seen some folks do in discovery conversations. So looking forward to it. And thank you so much, Steve. It's been fantastic to have you. I was a little worried. I was like, oh gosh, I don't know. What if we say something mean? Nope, we're here for it. We can do those hard things.
I was really worried that you'd say something mean too. Somebody said, I love feedback as long as it comes in the form of unqualified praise.
Awesome.
Good point. Good point.
All right. Well, we're going to switch over and start getting to our main topic. Before we do that, I do want to take just a quick moment to thank all of our sponsors. And we got in the studio with us here today, we got today's sponsor, both John and Josh from Career Whisperer. I probably introduce you in reverse order. Josh is the CEO and founder of Career Whisperer, and John is head of product at Career Whisperer. And Josh, why don't you come up to the mic here and introduce yourself real quick and tell everybody a little bit about what you're doing at Career Whisperer.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and we're very, very thankful to be part of the podcast. And Career Whisperer is simple. It's an online platform for execs and leaders that are, and product managers, of course, that are or should be in a career transition. We typically take them from going through months and months of searching and the pain and suffering involved to weeks. We're typically in the 6 to 12 weeks to get execs landed in the next positions.
Yep. I also, I was an early client on your platform, and it is a different approach than I've seen elsewhere to helping navigate and think about your career. That was why I was really thrilled to have Career Whisperer as a sponsor here on Product Coffee. It really helped me look at my own career in a different way and take advantage of some opportunities that I hadn't been taking advantage of, and inspired me to stretch myself and look at what I'm doing in a different way. So take a look, and you can go to careerwhisperer.co. You can reach out directly to Josh or John or me and I'll connect you to them if you don't have their direct connect. But their LinkedIn's are in the chat here. Kelly's been dropping them in, so they're easy to get a hold of. All right. And all of our sponsors are valuable. We thank you all. We could not do this every week without you. Kelly dropped the links into the chat there. We just ask that you go check out each of these sponsors at each of those links, get to know them, and decide, is there some way that I might want to engage with these sponsors, or is there someone in my network that I should introduce them to, understand what they do, so if the opportunity arrives to introduce them to someone in your network, that's how you can thank them for supporting your community. So please keep them in mind for doing that. All right. Today, one more thing. If this is your first time at Product Coffee, I think we've got some first timers here today. We do things a little bit different. This is not a webinar. This is a meetup. We're going to talk amongst ourselves. All you got to do if you want to jump into the conversation is raise your hand. We take notes together. We started this back at the beginning, and we've got a notes document at productcoffee.com/notes. You can jump in there. It's a Google Doc, so you can save a link to it to your own drive. It's there perpetually. And so instead of writing down little notes and insights and thoughts that you have or things that you heard that are valuable to you in your own notepad for yourself, do it in the group document so everyone can benefit from what you saw and what you thought about. Add comments. Add your debate in there as well. Any other links that you think might be valuable. And drop your LinkedIn profile at the bottom of that document as well so we can thank you for participating in that way. All right. So let's get into today's show. Last week, we had a whole hot takes discussion on the state of product management in general. And we were going to talk about the state of hiring and recruiting, but we didn't get to it. We spent so much time on so many other topics, so we just barely touched on this. And there was a lot of interest in coming back around. And I can tell by the audience today that the interest is still there. Lenny Rachitsky, who is the publisher of Lenny's newsletter, has been working for a couple of years now on doing a biannual state of the job market report. Ever since we had that massive downturn in 2022, especially in product management and tech jobs, for those of you who don't remember, Q4 2022, 90% of SaaS companies missed their revenue targets. And there was a massive bloodbath in the market. And so as that happened, there were a lot of changes in how hiring was done. And so Lenny's been tracking this, and they have done some really detailed analysis on the state of the job market, and he publishes that in his newsletter regularly. And Kelly dropped the link in there in the chat right there, the state of the product job market in early 2026. He had some really interesting findings. And some of them, frankly, didn't match what a lot of people in our audience are seeing and experiencing for themselves. So we wanted to talk about that and the real state of the job market, what we're seeing. So we have got an expanded panel here this morning. In addition to our first cup panel, we also want to welcome back Josh McAfee, who, as I said, is the founder and CEO of Career Whisperer. Josh has a thing for fire trucks and psychotic bunnies. And we are thrilled to have him here with us in addition to John, Brian, Steve, and Seth. So welcome, everybody. And so I want to jump in on this. For those of you who aren't familiar with Lenny's newsletter, Lenny was you should be. He was a product manager for Airbnb and decided that he wanted to be a content creator. So he went and started a newsletter. And it's one of the best researched product management newsletters. He trends a lot towards startup type topics as a general rule, but he tries to keep it through a product lens. And sometimes he comes back to the career lens, and he works with a company called TrueUp to do analysis not only of labor market data through the U.S. government, but also through actual job boards where they do a lot of aggregate research. And what he found in March of this year was that product management open roles are at a high for the last 3 years. They've gone back up to the highest point in over 3 years. They're still not at late 2021 levels. Engineering jobs are growing as well. And he had some other interesting insights. But I wanted to pull together a panel of folks who are experiencing this from different perspectives. So Josh, in addition to Career Whisperer, he's also the founder of a company called Humans Doing, which is a technology recruiting and sourcing company. And Brian has worked, as I said, in one of the largest, fastest growing B2C product companies in the world. And we also have Seth, who works in a company that is massively focused on human capital management. He's got a highly AI-enabled product pipeline and team, and is seeing a lot of new talent and skill requirements coming to bear. And Steve, of course, has been in the product management space since we just started calling it product management space, and has worked with thousands of product managers and hundreds of companies. So he sees the trends today in real time across a wide swath of companies on a nationwide or even global scale. So I wanted to dig in and get your perspective on what's really going on in the job market. Because I hear people saying, well, if the market is up, why am I still having such a hard time finding a real role that fits with my experience and fits with my expertise? So I want to lean on you first, Josh. You were kind of giving me a little bit of a hint as to some of the observations you had this morning. And so what did you think about this analysis, first of all?